part of having accurate casts is me taking the time to pour them properly. And so you can take the most perfect impression, you can have a great patient, get the whole field dry, and you can have a lot of inaccuracies if the same attention to detail is not paid in pouring the models as it is in making the impressions. So what we're going to show you here is the things that go into preparing the casts so that we'll be able to get a good clean pour, have all the land areas captured, and also using the correct water powder ratios as well as vacuum mixing the stone so that we have bubble-free models and we have the appropriate amount of expansion. Okay, we follow these details, putting the face bow mounted cast on the articulator with a good bite record, we can be sure that what is going on in the mouth we'll be able to see on the casts. Okay, so let's go ahead and just look at Mariah, things that she would do normally to our polyvinyl siloxane impressions to then fabricate beautifully manicured casts. So the first thing we're going to do is just get the impressions ready before we pour the stone. And so there's a couple things that we do. Normally the first thing we're going to do is use a product called Super Wet to just spray inside the polyvinyl siloxane layers and the impressions. And what that does is just kind of wets the area so that the stone will flow appropriately into it. There's also a material called Wonderfill that we'll use on the mandibular cast, and what it does is it just blocks out the area where the tongue sits. And it's just mix it up with your hands, you apply it to the tongue area on the mandibular impression, and this will come in really handy when you pour the stone into that because it just ends up eliminating the whole problem of a big glob of stone getting up in between the two sides of the arches in the mandible. So once that's done, we can go ahead and get an appropriate amount of stone and water, and we'll show you how we're going to vacuum mix that. Now there's a lot of different types of stone out there, and I think the most important thing is that you use whatever you're going to use, follow the manufacturer's recommendations on what the water to powder ratio is. We can't emphasize enough the importance of vacuum spatulating your models. Having a bubble-free model that has been mixed under vacuum is going to make the models more dimensionally stable. It will allow for a much denser cast and just increase the quality of what you're doing. So it doesn't take really any more time to mix it properly than to do it improperly. This is the a mixer from Whitmix. Just goes in the machine, spins it. It will do it for a specific period of time. That'll take the guesswork out of this operation. This gives the assistant the time to, again, take one last look at the impressions, get any of the material that she's sprayed into the impressions out. So you have a nice, clean surface to flow the stone into. Counting down now, about 5 more seconds. At this point, it will release it. And just take your time here. We've got plenty of time to get the stone into the cast. And get the stone down into the bottom of the mixing bowl. And then get you a spatula. Just take a little bit at a time. Use the vibrator. And you just want to flow that stone in just a little at a time, making sure you're watching it get into all aspects of the impression. Again, do the mandibular cast first. I think a lot of times in busy restorative practices, it's really easy to just get this into the lab, mix up as much stone as you possibly can at once, and try to do multiple models. And seems like we're being efficient when we do that, but there's a price to be paid. And if you think about it just logically, if we're trying to really analyze an occlusion and see where the first point of contact is, if you don't have models that have set properly, you're going to end up having models that are inaccurate and probably see interferences in places that really don't exist. So you've gone all this level to go ahead and have really accurate impressions like we've done here with this polyvinyl material. Just makes sense to have somebody trained on your team that can spend a little time and get the models just right for you. And then once we have the good models poured, then we can go through the rest of the process of mounting the cast and with the face bow and the bite racker, and again following a similar technique when we mix the mounting stone in terms of following the water powder ratio and getting again the proper amount of set time and dimensionally stable stone. So at that point, turn the vibrator off and we can go ahead and get a little bit of our base in place. Have something to work for or work with when we go to trim it. I think we'll go ahead and stop this here, and once it's set up, we can show you how do we take it the rest of the way. Once the stone has gotten to a set that you're comfortable with, the models can now be flipped over. Smoothing the outside there and get it nice and smooth. And then that can just be left to set up the rest of the way. And then these impressions will be ready to be, or these models will be ready to be trimmed and groomed, at which point you can then go through the process of mounting them in an articulator.